This story begins with the death of our female lead's husband, Nikola, who is 9 months pregnant. We see her arriving all alone in a big city in search of the reason for her husband's death. Nikola and Jeremy were happily married. Jeremy used to work as an accounts manager for a branch of the J-Star hotel chain, and Nikola, 9 months pregnant, was expecting a baby any time. One day she got a call from Jeremy, who had to go on a sudden business trip to China, and the next day, Nikola was called by the police telling her that Jeremy had committed suicide. Next, we see the scene inside the main office of the J-Star hotel chain, where Nikola has come to meet the president, Mr. Jones. Since she does not have an appointment, the staff at the office try to stop her from going inside, but a lady named Kathy allows Nikola to meet the president. Kathy is the elder daughter-in-law of President Jones, and she wants Nikola to meet Mr. Jones because Jeremy worked for President Jones's younger daughter-in-law, Martha, and Kathy wants Martha in trouble. They are both always plotting against each other to gain larger power in their father-in-law's company. Before Nikola could meet Mr. Jones, Martha arrives and asks her to leave, but Nikola insists that her husband could not have committed suicide, mentioning that 3 days ago they had celebrated their anniversary, and Jeremy was very excited to welcome his baby into the world. However, Martha doesn't listen to anything Nikola has to say, and asks security to throw her out. A flashback shows that Martha committed financial misconduct, and Kathy was trying to catch her fraud. In a panic, Martha asked Jeremy, the accounting manager working under her, to take the blame for her. She even gave him lots of money and asked him to go to China for a while. Jeremy declined the offer as he had done nothing wrong, but Martha begged him on her knees, and Jeremy could not say no. So he went to a warehouse to spend the night as he was supposed to board a ship to China in the morning. In the warehouse, Jeremy heard the voices of Kathy's daughter, Kendall, and her secret boyfriend, Max, who were having a fight. Max was a poor man, and Kendall's mother wanted her to go on blind dates with rich men. So when Kendall sees Jeremy, she thinks that he is her mother's spy and starts shouting at him. Max also starts beating Jeremy without listening to his explanation, and in the end, they accidentally set the warehouse on fire while fighting. Jeremy makes Max and Kendall leave and tries to grab his briefcase of money, but a burning rod falls on him and he becomes unconscious. Later, we see someone taking away the bag and telephone from his hands while he is lying on the floor, and a couple is seen watching the warehouse burn from a distance, not understanding what is happening. Jeremy burns to death, and Martha and her people spread the rumor that he was a traitor and a fraud, running away with the company's money but feeling guilty and committing suicide in the end. Now we see Nikola crying and shouting, asking Martha to let her meet Mr. Jones to discuss her husband's death. At that moment, Duke, our male lead, comes to the office and sees this scene. He is the son of Martha and is set to be the next CEO of the J-Star hotel chain. He misunderstands the situation, thinking the woman crying to meet his grandfather is his grandpa's lover, and assuming that his grandpa, at his age, has made a 20-year-old girl pregnant. Next, we see people living in a guest house called Cherry Blossom, which is very close to the main branch of the J-Star Hotel. A woman gets down from a police van in front of the guest house, and her name is Jojo. She is the daughter of the owner of the guest house, Madam Cole. Authorities sent Jojo to prison for a night for selling fake goods, and when she gets out of the police van, her best friend Ken is waiting for her in front of the guest house. Ken lives for free at Cherry Blossom, and he and Jojo share one ambition in life. They want to marry rich partners and spend their lives in luxury. Upon entering the guest house, Madam Cole shouts at them for being frauds. Next, we see an old man named Mr. Dan arriving at the guest house. He is an old lover of Madam Cole who betrayed her and left her 50 years ago to marry another woman. Now, he wants to live the rest of his life with her and has come to ask for forgiveness. Another couple, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, also arrives at the guest house. They are the same people who watched the warehouse burn from afar that night and plan to commit suicide together for some reason, deciding to stay at the guest house until nightfall. Next, the scene shifts back to Nikola, who is walking out of the J-Star Hotel, feeling very sad and sick. Suddenly, her water breaks and she is about to give birth to her baby. She gets on her knees on the road, writhing in pain. Hearing her cries, the people in the Cherry Blossom guest house come out and find her lying on the road. Madam Cole instructs everyone to carefully bring her inside, and with the help of Madam Cole, Nikola gives birth to a healthy baby boy. Everyone in the guest house is very happy for her, and even Mr. and Mrs. Smith decide to postpone their plans of dying to avoid spoiling the special day for the baby and mother. After hearing Nikola's story, Madam Cole offers her a place to stay at the guest house while she searches for the truth behind her husband's death, and Nikola is very grateful for her help. Meanwhile, we see Max and Kendall fighting again. Max feels guilty, thinking Jeremy died because of him. but Kendall dismisses his concerns, saying Jeremy was just a poor man, so it doesn't matter. Max becomes angry with Kendall for treating poor people as if they are not human, and since he is also poor, he breaks up with her and leaves her apartment. Coincidentally, he arrives at the Cherry Blossom guest house to stay there, where Ken tells him about Nikola and her story. Realizing she is Jeremy's wife, Max feels even more guilty and decides to help her as much as he can, even calling Kendall to confess to the police about that night in the warehouse, but Kendall warns him against doing anything of the sort. Later, we see Kendall feeling sad as she looks at a picture of herself with Max, missing him and recalling the day they took that photo. Max had come to coach her in playing golf since he was a pro player, but Kendall had spoken rudely to him, and Max, unimpressed by her wealth, had scolded her for her behavior, making Kendall fall in love with him at that very moment. Next, we see Duke giving a great presentation at the J-Star office after becoming the director. His mother and grandpa are happy for him, but Kendall is ready to fight him for the ownership of J-Star. Later, while driving, Duke spots Nikola and notices she no longer has her baby bump, leading him to think she was faking her pregnancy to get money from his grandpa. He decides to confront her, follows her to the guest house, and waits for her to come out again. When Nikola eventually emerges, he asks her where the baby went and teases her to show him her tummy. But Nikola, thinking he's trying to harass her in broad daylight, angrily kicks him between his legs. Duke, despite being in pain, gets up and grabs Nikola's wrist, refusing to let what he believes to be a gold digger blackmail his grandpa. But Nikola, even more enraged, headbutts Duke, hitting him so hard that he falls to the ground. When Duke returns home, he tells his mother that a wild woman hit him and left a wound on his head, and he begins to plan his revenge on her. Meanwhile, Nikola tells Madame Cole that she and her husband met at an orphanage, as they were both orphans with no relatives, prompting Madame Cole to start taking extra care of her. In the guest house, everyone begins treating Nikola and her baby with care and love, becoming like one big family who supports each other, often sitting together for dinner and lunch, with Ken and Jojo always trying to lighten the mood by singing and dancing to make everyone laugh. Meanwhile, Nikola has started investigating her husband's death and meets the boatman near the warehouse, but he doesn't tell her anything and asks her to leave. On the other side, we see Ken's room, where he has pictures of Kathy and Martha on his wall, as they are his prime targets because he wants to marry a rich woman and live in luxury. He regularly visits a beauty clinic for Botox treatments, and there he meets Kathy, who has just undergone plastic surgery and has her face covered with bandages. Ken, not recognizing her, speaks rudely to her. Later, while riding his bike, Ken nearly hits a woman, and when he stops and turns back, he sees that it's Martha. Ken gets off his bike to help her up, thinking he has impressed her, but she finds him rude for not apologizing. Meanwhile, Jojo is preparing for the Miss Nation contest, which she has participated in many times but never won. She is now about to cross the upper age limit, making this her last chance to win. She daydreams about how many rich men will want to marry her after winning the title. Next, we see Mr. Jones driving to the office with Duke. He tells Duke he is very satisfied with his work and no longer worries about his business because he trusts him to handle everything. The car drives by the Cherry Blossom guest house, and Mr. Jones looks at it and suddenly becomes sad. Duke assumes his grandpa knows Nikola is staying there and thinks she is blackmailing him with a fake pregnancy, so he decides to meet her and end the drama. Next, we see Jojo getting ready for her new job at a golf club, feeling happy to have a job, but a manager informs her that she is fired because someone complained about her. Jojo was caught selling fake golf clubs, and someone reported this to her new employer. Jojo demands the name of the person who complained, and after learning it, she angrily rushes off to confront them. While running to catch the person, she runs into Mr. Jones, who has also come to play golf, and as he tries to catch her, she falls down, losing one of her shoes. Jojo quickly gets up and continues running, leaving behind her shoe, while Mr. Jones, captivated by her glowing face, falls in love with her instantly. Next, we see Duke watching Nikola cross the road with her baby on her back. He is surprised to see the baby and goes to the guest house. He calls out for Nikola, who becomes furious upon seeing him inside and demands he leave or she will call the police. Max, hearing her shouts, comes out and also tells Duke to leave. Duke accuses them of being partners in fraud and blackmailing his grandpa to make money, mistakenly thinking that Max is the baby's father. He calls his lawyer in front of them, but Nikola and Max laugh at him for faking the call, knowing he's afraid of the police. Duke, frustrated, says he will return with his lawyer next time and leaves. Meanwhile, Martha is having her people keep an eye on Nikola to prevent her from discovering the truth. Nikola is convinced J-Star is involved in her husband's death, so she goes to the main branch to meet the president again, but the staff once more asks her to make an appointment first. Duke hears her voice and approaches, But Nikola, thinking he has been following her, starts scolding him. However, Duke's secretary intervenes, and Nikola is shocked to learn that Duke is the director of J-Star, realizing that he can help her meet Mr. Jones. Later, we see Nikola sitting in Duke's office, explaining her situation and asking him to help her meet the president, also revealing that her husband mentioned going on a business trip in his last call. Duke feels guilty for misjudging her and calling her a gold digger, so he decides to let her meet his grandpa. When Duke's mother Martha learns of this, she tries to persuade Nikola to return to her village, but Nikola refuses. Meanwhile, Mr. Jones is still thinking about JoJo. He has kept her shoe and constantly looks at it, planning to find her. At the same time, JoJo is at the police station after getting into a fight with the person who complained about her at the golf club, and Ken and her family arrive to take her back. Next, we see Kendall meeting with Max in a cafe, asking him to forget about Jeremy, but Max, feeling very guilty, is struggling to move on. Someone secretly takes a photo of them, and later, Kendall returns home drunk, shocking everyone with her behavior. She tells her grandpa, Mr. Jones, that she is upset because he keeps giving her projects to Duke, accusing him of favoring Duke and not treating her equally. Kathy takes her to her room and scolds her for making a scene, but Kendall confides that she is upset not only because of Grandpa's favoritism, but also because Max is still not getting back with her. Kathy gets angry and tells Kendall to stay away from Max, reminding her that he is just a poor golf player. Martha overhears their conversation from outside the room, and later when Kathy comes out, Martha suggests that Kathy marry her daughter to someone she likes. Kathy, frustrated, snaps back that if Martha is so eager, she should marry her son to some poor girl, but Martha retorts that Duke has high standards, unlike Kendall. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Smith have decided to take their own lives, and they buy a large quantity of sleeping pills for that. Madam Cole, noticing them buying the pills, becomes worried. Later, the Smiths take the pills and lie down next to each other, believing they will never wake up again, only to be surprised when they do. Madam Cole then reveals that she knew they were planning to commit suicide, so she swapped their pills with sugar capsules. She and Mr. Dan scold them for disrespecting their lives and ask why they wanted to die. Mr. and Mrs. Smith share their tragic story, explaining that Mr. Smith, once a chef at the J-Star Hotel, was given poor quality food to prepare dishes, leading to customer complaints. He was unjustly dismissed, and a long, costly legal battle against J-Star that left them with nothing. Having lost everything, they felt they had no reason to live and decided on suicide. Madam Cole and Mr. Dan encouraged them to learn from Nikola, who also lost everything but is working hard to make a living for her baby. Touched by their words, Mr. and Mrs. Smith become emotional and decide to give life another try. On the other side, JoJo is preparing for the Miss Nation contest, and although Ken makes fun of her, he is shocked when she reveals the prize money for the contest. Meanwhile, Nikola has reached the main branch of J-Star again, waiting for Duke, and as soon as he arrives at the office, she asks him to let her meet Mr. Jones. Duke initially wants to ask her to wait, but when Nikola's baby starts crying, he decides to let her meet Grandpa and then make her leave. In the president's office, Martha is already sitting with Grandpa when Nikola tries to explain that her husband was honest and that the allegations of him stealing money from the company must be untrue. She argues that he was very happy a day before his death, making it unlikely that he would commit suicide. But President Jones, displeased with what she is saying, tells her to stop coming to his office repeatedly and suggests that she should be grateful they are not taking her to court for what her husband did. Nikola, silenced by Grandpa's words, leaves the office and begins to wonder if her husband really did commit suicide. Later, Nikola plans to return to her village and informs the guest house residents, but Madam Cole scolds her, urging her to stay in the city and make a living for her baby since she has no relatives in the village. Meanwhile, Kathy instructs her people to keep an eye on Nikola, hinting at a scheme she is planning. Elsewhere, JoJo shows Max and Ken a video on Nikola's phone that depicts Jeremy and Nikola happy together, which makes Max feel even more guilty. Max has been having nightmares every night, seeing Jeremy trapped in the fire because of him, so he decides to go to the village police station, where Jeremy's case was filed, to confess to the police. He calls and informs Kendall before leaving for the station, but Kendall chases him and manages to stop him just as he's about to enter. She reminds him of his career and his mother, warning him that he will never be able to become a national golf player if he gets involved in a crime. After a long conversation, she convinces Max to change his mind, and it seems they are getting back together. Next, someone leaves a letter for Nikola at the guest house, stating that her husband did not commit suicide, which motivates Nikola to reopen her husband's case and sue J-Star for his death. She goes back to her village's police station, but the policeman refuses to reopen the case, showing her a resignation letter and explaining that Jeremy had already resigned before his suicide. On her way back from the village, Nikola meets her old neighbors, who ask about the money Jeremy was accused of stealing, making Nikola very sad as everyone has already branded Jeremy a thief. Later, Mr. Jones visits the Cherry Blossom guest house, where it becomes apparent that he and Madame Cole already know each other. He comments on how old she has become and asks her to sell the guest house to him, but Madame Cole angrily starts beating him with a broom. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, having decided to give life another try, plan to take down Kathy this time. They throw a sack full of flour at Kathy and tell her they will not give up this time, leaving Kathy surprised by their newfound courage. Next, Ken starts working at the same golf club where Jojo was fired, serving as a coach, and repeatedly encounters Martha, whom he is trying to impress, and it seems like his efforts are working. Meanwhile, Grandpa Jones is still searching for Jojo, determined to find her no matter how long it takes. On the other side, Kendall has asked Nikola to come to her office, where she offers her money to open a shop and start thinking about her future, urging her to accept her husband's suicide. Nikola, however, becomes furious at the suggestion, now more certain than ever, that J-Star is involved in Jeremy's death. She tells Kendall that she will never give up until she uncovers the truth, leading to a heated argument that escalates into a physical fight. Duke enters Kendall's office just in time to see Nikola pushing Kendall, and he assumes she is causing trouble again. Later, we see Duke working out in J-Star's gym, where he loses his balance while lifting weights. A woman helps him put them down, and to his surprise, it is Nikola, who has started working at J-Star's gym. She effortlessly manages to lift the heavy weights, leaving Duke amazed. However, her manager soon informs her that she is fired because the director, Duke, does not feel comfortable around her. Nikola chases after Duke to ask why he fired her, but Duke, waiting for the elevator, remains silent, actually afraid of Nikola beating him up. As the elevator doors close, he starts laughing, teasing Nikola by saying he fired her simply because he could. On the other hand, Martha keeps watching Ken's tutorial videos, and it seems she has started thinking about him. She even goes to the golf club to see him, but Ken ignores her, paying attention to other women, which makes Martha very jealous. Next, Grandpa Jones, still searching for Jojo, is advised by his secretary to stop looking for the woman and take some rest. While in the elevator, Grandpa Jones begins to feel weak and sits down, and coincidentally, Jojo enters the elevator and asks him if he is all right, repeatedly calling him an old man. After Grandpa Jones exits the elevator, he realizes that Jojo was the woman he has been searching for, but the elevator doors have already closed. Desperate, he starts running down the stairs but is forced to stop after a few steps due to his weakness. Later, at home, Kathy and Martha ask him why he ran down the stairs, but he angrily tells them to leave, still upset that Jojo called him an old man. Next, we see that Nikola has secured another job at J-Star, as she is determined to stay close to the people involved in Jeremy's death to find clues. Duke, on a call, notices a familiar voice and discovers that Nikola is working in a different position. Nikola explains that J-Star's proximity to the guest house makes it easier for her to get back to her baby, and Duke reluctantly agrees to let her work. Soon, it is the day of Jojo's beauty contest, and she has chosen a white dress for the final round. While the contestants practice their walk, she adds some extra moves to stand out, causing everyone to laugh at her. All the residents of the Cherry Blossom guest house are coming to cheer her on, and coincidentally, the chief guest is Grandpa Jones, who has asked his family to attend the event. On the other side, Max's mother falls ill, and he needs money to provide her with proper care, so he decides to return to golf and start practicing seriously. On his way back to the guest house, he is stopped by a group of gangsters who start beating him and warn him to stop dating Kendall. Nikola, returning to the guest house after work, sees Max being attacked and intervenes, using her strength to fight off the gangsters. She headbutts one man, causing him to fall, and threatens the rest by saying she is calling the police, prompting them to flee. After returning with Max, everyone urges him to file a police complaint, but Max declines, suspecting that Kendall's mother might have sent the gangsters to beat him up. Anyway, they help him dress his wounds and send him to the hospital. Meanwhile, Jojo's contest has already started, and she drinks a lot of energy drinks to subdue her nervousness. That causes her to urgently need to use the washroom, but there is a line in front of the ladies' room, where Kathy and Martha are also waiting. Jojo tries to cut the line, explaining that she is a contestant and the competition is about to start, but Kathy and Martha stop her. When Jojo attempts to enter first, they step on her dress, causing it to tear, and she angrily confronts them. Later, JoJo tries to fix her dress with safety pins, but feels uncomfortable wearing it on stage and stumbles, introducing herself incorrectly. Next, we see that Duke and Kendall are also at the event, but both are getting bored. Meanwhile, Grandpa Jones is surprised to see JoJo on stage, and Kathy and Martha recognize her as the woman they met near the washroom. Meanwhile, the guests from the Cherry Blossom Guest House are running late for the event and rush to the venue, hoping to make it before the final round. Next, we see JoJo qualifying among the 2 finalists in the last round. She is overjoyed and tells the other contestants that she will treat them to a celebration once she wins. Grandpa Jones is invited on stage to announce the winner, and upon seeing the name in the envelope, he realizes it is not JoJo. Hesitant to announce the results, fearing it will sadden JoJo, he proceeds to crown the actual winner, but then crowns JoJo as well, telling her that although she did not win the contest, she won his heart. Everyone is surprised by his words, and his family begins to think that Grandpa has gone mad. When the guest house residents finally arrive, the contest is already over. At the entrance, they encounter Grandpa Jones and his family, who are leaving. Madam Cole and Mr. Dan see Grandpa Jones. Kathy notices Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and Kendall and Duke face Nikola. It's like 2 enemy clans confronting each other. Mr. Dan angrily grabs Grandpa Jones by the collar, telling him that whenever he sees him, he is reminded of the past. Everyone tries to separate them, but Mr. Dan takes Grandpa Jones into a corner to discuss something privately. On the other side, JoJo is drinking free champagne at the venue because she is sad after losing. When the cleaning staff asks her to leave, she hides 2 champagne bottles in her overcoat and runs to the exit, drunkenly imitating an airplane. However, when she spots Kathy and Martha at the entrance, she becomes angry, remembering how they had ruined her dress. While Kathy is busy arguing with Mr. and Mrs. Smith, JoJo attacks them with the corks of the champagne bottles, opening one bottle and hitting Kathy in the face, then opening the next one and hitting Martha. Champagne splashes over both women, and Duke, who steps in front to save them, ends up getting splashed as well, even swallowing a large gulp of champagne as it goes directly into his mouth. Chaos ensues as Martha and Kathy attack JoJo, and Mrs. Smith joins in, hitting Kathy. Meanwhile, Nikola tries to intervene but gets sidetracked when she sees Kendall, and they also start fighting each other. Duke watches the chaos unfold, too afraid to get involved and risk getting hit. So he stands in a corner holding his mother's bag. Even Mr. Smith does not dare to intervene, and Ken, seeing everything from afar, decides to run away to avoid ruining his image in front of Martha. Later, Nikola's baby starts crying, so she leaves with Madam Cole to return to the guest house, while Kathy and Martha continue hitting JoJo. At that moment, Grandpa Jones arrives and steps in to help JoJo, pushing away both of his daughters-in-law. Everyone is confused, wondering whose side he is on. That night back at home, Grandpa Jones scolds his daughters-in-law for hitting JoJo. They are shocked and ask why he is protecting a stranger instead of his own family, but Grandpa Jones gives no reply and walks away. On the other side, Ken and the others bring JoJo back to the guest house, where she falls asleep. The next morning, she wakes up with no memory of the previous night, and Ken reminds her how she hit both ladies of the J-Star family. JoJo regrets her actions, realizing that she now has even less chance of getting employed at J-Star. Meanwhile, Max thanks Nikola for saving him from the gangsters, and Nikola asks him to speak casually with her since she is younger than him. Later, when Max meets Kendall, she notices his wounds and realizes that her mother must have sent people to attack him. Furious, she goes home and confronts her mother, threatening to stop trying to take over J-Star and leave the country forever. Kendall declares that she will move abroad and date foreigners if her mother doesn't stop interfering. Kathy, alarmed by Kendall's threat, reluctantly allows her to date Max, but reminds her that marriage is out of the question. Kendall, thrilled to get her mother's approval, tells Max about it and urges him to focus on his career and become a famous golfer so they can eventually marry. Next, we see Mr. and Mrs. Smith selling their car because they have no money left. As they leave the car dealership, the worker hands them the memory card from their dash cam, which turns out to be key evidence, as their car was parked in front of the warehouse the day Jeremy died. However, unaware of its significance, Mrs. Smith simply puts it back in her bag. Meanwhile, Martha visits the golf club and sees Ken handing out signed copies of his novel to all the women there. When he approaches Martha, he pretends not to remember her, but after she reminds him of their previous encounter, Ken writes a special message in her copy of the novel, making Martha very happy to receive such special treatment. Next, Nikola visits Jeremy's friend back in the village. The friend who used to work with Jeremy has called Nikola to collect a parcel that Jeremy had ordered at his office's address. When Nikola asks about Jeremy's office life, the friend can only say that Jeremy was honest and was just following Mr. Leo's orders. When Nikola asks to meet Mr. Leo, she learns that he has already left the company. In a flashback, we see that Jeremy had confronted Mr. Leo about the money scam, not wanting to take the blame for something he hadn't done. But Mr. Leo warned him that if he didn't agree to the plan, they might all end up in jail. Later, Nikola picks up the parcel and heads back to the city, but the box is so heavy that she soon becomes tired. Just then, she spots Duke passing by on the road, also returning to the city after finishing some work at the village branch. Duke, feeling tired, stops and calls his assistant to send a driver for him. Overhearing his conversation, Nikola, with an innocent face, offers to drive him, even showing him her driver's license. Duke reluctantly agrees, and Nikola happily stashes the heavy box in the car's trunk. However, during the drive, Duke is unimpressed by her driving skills and fears for his life. Meanwhile, Kathy, upset about Kendall and Max's love affair, worries that Martha and Duke will take over J-Star, leaving her daughter with only a poor boyfriend. Determined to bring them down, she plans to use Jeremy's death and Nikola for her purposes. Kathy also asks Grandpa Jones for a job, but he reminds her of the trouble she caused when she managed the bakery at J-Star. Kathy promises not to repeat past mistakes, and also asks Duke to convince Grandpa. Next, Grandpa Jones calls Jojo for a meeting. Jojo, thinking she has been summoned because she hit the women from his family, fears he wants to scold her. She covers her face with a cap and scarf, but when she arrives, Grandpa Jones is delighted to see her. Jojo bows and apologizes for her behavior that night, but Grandpa Jones reassures her that she doesn't need to worry about it. When Jojo looks at him, she realizes that he is the same old man she helped in the elevator, and mentions that she remembers meeting him before, calling him Old Man, which annoys Grandpa Jones. He insists that no one calls him old, claiming he still looks young and has a young heart, much to Jojo's surprise at his shamelessness. Later, when Grandpa Jones returns home, he is in a very happy mood, giving money to both his daughters-in-law, and even allowing Kathy to rejoin the company, much to her delight, though Martha is not pleased. Next, Kathy meets with Nikola and offers her the position of personal secretary, explaining that she wants to bring down Martha and will help Nikola investigate Jeremy's death. Nikola agrees to the offer without hesitation. Meanwhile, Grandpa Jones recalls how Mr. Dan grabbed his collar that night and decides to teach them a lesson. Soon after, the police arrive at the Cherry Blossom guest house to check for any disregard of regulations. Madam Cole quickly realizes that Mr. Jones must have sent the police to cause trouble and storms into his office to confront him. She throws salt at him and demands he stop being so arrogant about his money, but her actions seem to have no effect on Grandpa Jones. Later, Duke is at the hospital for a regular checkup when he runs into Nikola, who is there to get her baby vaccinated. Duke tries to ignore her, but when Nikola urgently needs to use the washroom, she asks him to watch her baby and leaves in a rush. Soon, it's the baby's turn to see the doctor, and Duke has no choice but to carry the baby into the doctor's room. When the nurse takes out a syringe to administer the vaccine, Duke panics, repeatedly asking if it will hurt the baby. Despite the nurse and doctor assuring him it won't, Duke continues to worry until Nikola returns and witnesses the scene. The nurse assumes Duke is the father and comments on how protective he is, leading both Nikola and Duke to loudly deny the assumption. Later, as Duke drives back to J-Star, he sees Nikola walking back to the guest house in the cold and feels bad for the baby, so he offers them a ride. Nikola accepts, but soon after, Duke smells something bad and asks what it is. Nikola tells him that the baby has soiled his diaper, but since it's too cold to open the windows, Duke has to endure the smell all the way back. After dropping them off at the guest house, he opens all the car windows and starts fanning himself through the door, then asks Nikola to please stay away from him. Next, we see Mrs. Smith has started working at a sauna, and when Jojo visits, she offers her a free massage. Jojo brings her some snacks as a return gift and cheers her on, showing how they seem like a family. On the other hand, Mr. Smith has also started working as a physical helper, moving heavy boxes, but he is struggling with the job. Next, Grandpa Jones calls Jojo for another meeting under the pretense of hosting a lunch party for all the beauty contest participants. However, when Jojo arrives at the restaurant, she finds only Mr. Jones there, who reveals that he canceled everyone else's booking because he just wanted to meet her. He presents Jojo with a box, and when she opens it, she finds her shoe inside. Grandpa Jones explains that she left it behind when they first met, just like Cinderella, and tells her he lost his heart to her that day and will call her Cinderella Jojo from now on. He confesses his feelings for her, leaving Jojo shocked and unsure how to respond. As Grandpa Jones drops Jojo off at her house, He asks about her relationship with Madam Cole and Mr. Dan, having seen them together that night after the contest. Jojo playfully asks if he means her mom, which makes Grandpa Jones freeze in shock, but Jojo quickly lies and says they're just neighbors, much to Grandpa's relief. The next day, as the Jones family prepares to leave for work, they find Nikola waiting in front of their house. Duke and Grandpa Jones ask her what she wants, and Kathy explains that she hired Nikola as her new personal secretary, and that Nikola is there to drive her to work. Grandpa Jones simply wishes her luck and leaves, while Martha is visibly upset that Kathy hired Nikola. Duke also dislikes the idea of seeing Nikola around even more. Later, we see Kathy sleeping in her office, having requested so much for the position, but showing little interest in actually working. When Nikola tries to ask her to do something, Kendall arrives and starts fighting with Nikola, demanding to know why she is in her mother's office and grabbing her hair. Duke, passing by Kathy's office, hears the commotion and initially wants to ignore it, but when he sees Kendall viciously grabbing Nikola's hair, he intervenes and breaks them apart. Duke takes Nikola outside and asks why they were fighting. Nikola explains that Kendall started it, but Duke doesn't believe her and questions why she's so desperate for a job when her baby is so small, asking if she has no relatives. Nikola responds that she is an orphan and needs money to raise her baby. Suddenly, she has a nosebleed, causing Duke to panic. He hands her his handkerchief, but when Nikola wipes her nose messily, Duke takes it back and does it himself. Realizing how close they are standing, Duke feels a sudden attraction to her and quickly moves away, leaving in a hurry. Later, Nikola receives a message from Jeremy's friend that she met the other day at the village. The friend has sent her a picture of Mr. Leo, and Nikola decides to find him first. Meanwhile, Jojo looks at the shoe that Grandpa Jones returned to her and thinks about his confession. It makes her happy, and she doesn't care about his age. She has always wanted a luxurious life, and now it seems she has finally hit the jackpot. Later, she tries to ask her mother, Madam Cole, about her rivalry with Mr. Jones, but she doesn't tell her anything. Jojo then gets a call from Mr. Jones's secretary, who asks for her address to drop off a parcel from his boss. Jojo arranges to meet at the nearest convenience store, where she receives an expensive dress and heel sandals, making her feel like she really has become Cinderella. Mr. Jones later calls to ask her out to dinner at a members-only club, and Jojo dreams of debuting in high-class society. But when she arrives, she finds the venue full of old people. Mr. Jones then explains that it is a senior citizens club. On the other hand, Kendall keeps causing trouble for Nikola, sending her on small errands that make her run around a lot. As Nikola is returning from one of these errands, she spots Mr. Leo leaving the office. She stops him and asks if he is Mr. Leo, but he denies it. Nikola checks the picture her friend sent that morning and realizes that it is indeed Mr. Leo. He is lying to her. She runs after him and tries to stop him, but he gets into his car and hits her in his rush to escape, leaving Nikola unconscious on the ground. Duke sees her fall and rushes to help her. Duke, who has just bought flowers for his mother after receiving his first salary as the director of J-Star, tells Martha not to worry about the company anymore, assuring her that he will handle everything and encouraging her to focus on her own life and start dating. Martha's very happy to hear that her son cares so much about her. Just then, Nikola marches into Martha's office, accusing her of meeting Mr. Leo, who was involved in Jeremy's death. Martha denies meeting any Mr. Leo, insisting that he has already left the company. Nikola, convinced that Martha is lying, demands to see the CCTV footage, but Martha's secretary informs them that the CCTV cameras have been down for the past 2 days. Later, Duke angrily takes Nikola outside and warns her to stop causing trouble for his mother. He tells her to stop bringing up her husband's death and threatening to get her fired if she doesn't. Nikola, saddened, asks if he has ever lost something he loved most in the world and what he would do if he were in her place. Could he let it go? Duke calms down after hearing this and leaves. Later, he asks Kendall to stop fighting with Nikola and to ignore her. Nikola then goes to Kathy and tells her everything that happened with Mr. Leo and Martha, surprising Kathy, who realizes that Martha is hiding something big. Next, we see Madam Cole and Mr. Dan at the farmer's market grocery shopping. The shopkeepers assume they are a married couple, and Mr. Dan doesn't deny it. Instead, he calls Madam Cole honey. Later on their way back, Madam Cole scolds him for calling her honey and beats him up. A passerby recognizes Mr. Dan and greets him, calling him Mr. Chairman. Madam Cole, surprised, asks about it, but Mr. Dan lies, claiming he was the chairman of a football club, so everyone calls him Chairman, winking at someone to help him with the lie. It seems Mr. Dan is a rich person hiding his true identity while living at the Cherry Blossom guest house. Meanwhile, Mr. Smith struggles with hard labor, dropping a heavy bag and spilling its contents. The manager scolds him for being careless, and Mrs. Smith gets sad on watching it. She asks him to stop working there because she can't bear to see him in such a condition. Elsewhere, Kathy arrives at the golf club and notices Ken, who is very popular among the female members. She recognizes him as the man who spoke rudely to her at the beauty clinic and calls him over to remind him of that day. Kathy then tells Ken that he must teach her golf within a month, or she will ensure he gets fired. Stuck in this situation, Ken can only fake a smile and agree with her. Later, Nikola returns to the guest house after work, her ankles injured from her work shoes, so she walks barefoot. Duke, watching her from his car, feels bad for her and a little guilty for scolding her that morning, so he stops and offers her his running shoes, even helping her put them on. Kendall, passing by on her way back from work, finds it strange that Duke cares so much about Nikola. Next, we see Max babysitting Nikola's baby. He has developed a lot of affection for the child since he often helps Nikola care for him. Mr. Dan enters the room and tells Max that people think he is the baby's father because he cares so much about him, and he just smiles in response. Just then, Kendall storms into the Cherry Blossom guest house, shouting for Max to come out. Everyone in the guest house comes out to see what's happening. When Max appears, Kendall demands that he pack his bags and leave with her, saying she can't let him live in such a rubbish place. Madam Cole is offended and asks Kendall how she can call her place rubbish, leading to an argument. Max, upset by Kendall's disrespect toward Madam Cole, pulls her out of the guest house and scolds her, saying he never knew she was so mannerless. Angered by Max's scolding, Kendall argues with him loudly. Nikola, returning from work, sees them fighting and Kendall leaving in anger. Afterward, everyone in the guest house warns Max to avoid Kendall, telling him that she and her mother, Kathy, are infamous for being cruel and rude at J-Star. Meanwhile, JoJo is stuck doing exercises for old people at the Senior Citizens Club with Mr. Jones, feeling embarrassed as she had expected a high society party. The next day, Nikola visits the resource section of J-Star, trying to get details about Mr. Leo. Despite her repeated requests, they refuse to give her any information. Dejected, she returns to Kathy's office, where Kathy asks what the matter is and claims she can resolve it with just a call. Kathy follows through, making a call and obtaining all the details about Mr. Leo, for which Nikola thanks her before setting off to meet him. In the elevator, Nikola runs into Duke and his secretary and overhears them talking about going to the same area where she needs to go. She asks Duke if she can accompany them, and he initially agrees. But when he learns that she is going there to meet Mr. Leo, he changes his mind, refusing to take her along. The previous night, he had asked his mother if she knew Mr. Leo, and Martha had denied it. So Duke, trusting his mother, doesn't want to help Nikola. Later, Duke arrives at another hotel for a meeting, while Nikola manages to find the place where Mr. Leo is hiding. She meets Mr. Leo outside his house, but when he sees her, he runs away. Nikola chases after him, explaining that she just wants to ask some questions, but he doesn't listen and keeps running. Just as she is about to catch him, a truck blocks her path, allowing Mr. Leo to escape. Frustrated, Nikola returns to his house and waits inside for his return. But soon, 2 policemen arrive and arrest her for trespassing, taking her to the police station. Meanwhile, Duke is giving a presentation at the meeting where Mr. Dan, dressed as a rich businessman, is also present. Mr. Dan shakes hands with Duke, who fails to recognize him. During the presentation, Duke notices a group picture in which his mother is standing right next to Mr. Leo, despite Martha's earlier claim that she had never met him. Confused, Duke wonders why his mother lied to him. After the meeting, Duke visits the commissioner for a business matter and sees Nikola being taken to the police station. When Nikola spots him, she calls out for help. The policeman explained that she was arrested for trespassing at Mr. Leo's place, and upon hearing this, Duke denies knowing Nikola, instructing the policeman to take strict action against her. At the police station, Nikola tries to call Kathy for help, but Kathy, having left her phone at the office, misses the call. Meanwhile, Martha heads to the golf club to meet Ken under the guise of practicing golf. She receives a phone call informing her that Nikola has been arrested, which makes her happy as she considers Nikola very dangerous. When Martha arrives at the golf club, she sees Ken coaching Kathy, holding her hands over the golf club as he teaches her, which makes Martha jealous and angry that Kathy joined the same club. After his session with Kathy, Ken finds Martha and offers her an invitation to his novel's release event. Martha, suspicious, asks if Kathy is also coming to the event, saying she won't attend if Kathy is present. Ken assures her that he only invited special people and wouldn't invite someone as rude as Kathy. Pleased by his response, Martha agrees to come. Kathy, watching them from afar, wonders what is going on between them. At dinner with some investors, Duke learns that Mr. Leo was a close business associate of Martha, who left the company recently due to some health issues. Duke is confused to learn this and wonders why his mother lied to him. He keeps thinking about Nikola and how she was insisting that Martha had met Leo that day. He wonders if Nikola was saying the truth all this time. He can't stay still and goes back to the police station of that remote area to get Nikola out on bail. Nikola is very grateful for his help and thanks him, but Duke says that he is not doing this for her but because of her baby, who must be missing his mother. He wants to drop her back at the guest house, but Nikola says she wants to go back to Leo's place. When they reach there, a neighbor informs them that Leo took everything and left in the afternoon. Nikola doesn't want to give up and climbs the walls of the house to get inside and search for clues. Duke stops her from doing it and asks if she wants to get arrested again, but Nikola says that it is not a crime anymore because no one lives here. Duke also tries to jump over the wall but is not able to do it, so Nikola opens the door for him. They look around the house, but there is nothing left inside. Nikola breaks down after this and starts crying. She says that she is trying so hard, but she is not able to do anything. Duke tries to convince her to go back to the guest house, but she refuses to go until she meets Leo. Duke leaves her and goes inside his car. Soon it starts raining, and he is not able to leave without Nikola. He waits for a long time outside the house, and in the end he gets back inside carrying an umbrella. Nikola is still crying, and Duke asks her to think about her baby. He says that if she keeps sitting here in the cold like this, she will get a fever, and then who will care for her baby? Later, he promises Nikola that he will find Mr. Leo for her, and she asks him if he is really going to do that. Duke agrees, so she gets ready to go back. She falls asleep soon after getting inside the car, and Duke thinks that she must have gotten tired after crying so much. In the guest house, Mr. Dan and Max are babysitting Nikola's baby. Later, Madam Cole comes and says it's her turn now, but Mr. and Mrs. Smith also come into the room and say that it is their turn to play with the baby. It seems that everyone in the guest house loves and cares for the baby a lot. On the other side, we see Grandpa Jones, who is sitting in a romantically decorated restaurant. He is very nervous because he has planned to propose to JoJo to officially date her. When JoJo arrives, he gets to the point and tells her that he wishes to date her seriously. He even shows her his medical reports and says that he is perfectly healthy. JoJo is taken aback and does not know what to say. Just then, Mr. Jones presents her with a diamond necklace. JoJo is amazed by the sight of so many diamonds and such a beautiful necklace. She wants to accept them right away, but she controls herself as she needs time to think it over. Mr. Jones asks her how much time she needs, to which JoJo says 1 month. Mr. Jones is not ready to wait for such a long time, as he is not sure how long he is going to live, and he says he can't give her more than 5 days. Later, we see JoJo taking a walk on her way back home and thinking about Mr. Jones's proposal. She is confused about what she should do. She thinks that age is a factor, but she can't let go of such a big jackpot. She gets a call from Ken, who asks her to come to his event and pretend to be a big fan. At first, JoJo disagrees, but when Ken offers her money, she agrees. Next, we see that Duke and Nikola have arrived at the guest house. Duke can't bring himself to wake up Nikola since she is sleeping so peacefully, so he decides to wait for some time and lets her sleep. He even tries to remove her seatbelt so that she can sleep comfortably. While doing it, Nikola wakes up suddenly and turns her head, which makes Duke disbalanced and they end up kissing. Duke is very shocked because of it, and he sits back in haste and starts explaining himself, but Nikola is very calm. She says he need not worry about it so much, because things like this can happen sometimes, and it is not a big deal. She gets down from the car and waves him goodbye, and Duke drives away in shock. He is wondering how Nikola could react so calmly in such a matter, and questions if she can't feel anything at all. On the other side, we see Martha going to Ken's book launch event. Kathy follows her and gets inside the venue as well. When Martha sees her, she gets upset and asks if she has an invitation, but Kathy tells her that a beautiful lady like her does not need an invitation to go to such events. Later, JoJo arrives at the venue with a big poster. She cheers for Ken, calling him handsome and charming. Kathy and Martha get annoyed with her constant shouting and turn to see her. When they find that it is the same woman who fought with them that night, they start fighting again. Kathy grabs JoJo's hair and says today she will take revenge for that night. There is chaos at the event, and Ken tries to quiet them down, but nothing works. Martha starts asking Kathy to calm down to help Ken, but she doesn't stop. In the end, the event is spoiled, and Ken scolds all 3 women for spoiling his book launch. Kathy does not care about it and wants to fight again with JoJo, but Martha pulls her out of the hall. Later, Kathy asks Martha whether she likes Ken because she's so concerned about his event. Martha denies it, but once Kathy leaves, she fixes the standee of Ken that Kathy toppled. In the end, she even stashes a poster of his face in her bag secretly. On the other side, we see Kendall, who gives Max a call and asks him to come out. When Max meets her, he explains that he didn't tell her about staying at Cherry Blossom because he knew it would worry her. Kendall apologizes for fighting with him the other day, but Max asks her to come in and apologize to the guest house's people for disrespecting them. Kendall refuses to say sorry to them and leaves in anger. Next, we see that when Kathy and Martha return home, Mr. Jones is in a very bad mood. Actually, their housekeeper had left because of an urgent matter for a few days. Grandpa Jones had asked Kendall to make dinner for him. Kendall boiled some instant noodles but spoiled them, and Grandpa Jones could not swallow a single bite. Next, we see Duke returning home for the night. He wants to talk to his mother about Mr. Leo and ask her why she was lying, but he is not able to ask her. Later, as he is brushing his teeth, he remembers the kiss he accidentally shared with Nikola. Actually, it was his first ever kiss, and he can't stop thinking about it. He gets mad at himself for opening the seatbelt, and wonders why he's getting more and more involved in Nikola's life. The next morning, we see that Mr. Dan is giving everyone in the guest house a breakfast treat. He also gives Max spending money since he is leaving for a competition and will return after several days. Madam Cole wonders where Dan is getting all this money from. Later, when Duke gets down from his house to leave for the office, he sees that Nikola is cleaning his car. She says that she is doing it to say thanks to him for his favors last night, but Duke ignores her and leaves because he is still thinking about the kiss and is embarrassed to face her. Later in the office, Duke is inside the elevator and the doors are about to close, when Nikola comes rushing from the other side and asks him to stop the elevator, but Duke doesn't. Nikola manages to put her feet between the doors and the elevator opens. Duke gets scared that Nikola might beat him up and shifts to the corner. Nikola asks him why he is ignoring her like that, but Duke does not say anything. Then Nikola asks if it is because of the accidental kiss last night and laughs at Duke. She says that he does not need to worry about it as he is not her type. Duke gets mad at her for saying that he is not her type and wonders if she thinks of herself as some princess. Later, at lunch in the canteen, Nikola offers him coffee as she reminds him of his promise. Duke says he remembers it, so she should leave and eat her lunch. When he sees her eating in huge bites, he thinks that she really loves her food. Next, we see Nikola telling Kathy everything that happened with Mr. Leo. Kathy is happy with Nikola's methods and encourages her to keep investigating. On the other side, Grandpa Jones pretends to be sick and calls Jojo, asking her to help him because he is all alone. Jojo does not want to go at first, but agrees after he keeps insisting. It turns out that she has taken some loans and the banks are calling her to pay them back as she has missed some installments. She would have returned the amount, but she lost her job, and now she is wondering if she should really date Mr. Jones despite the age gap. If she does, she wouldn't have to worry about money. When Jojo reaches Mr. Jones's house with flowers, he pretends to be sick in his bed and says that he will only recover after listening to her yes. Jojo takes care of him, brings him medicine, and helps him take it. Mr. Jones is very happy to be taken care of by Jojo. But just then, Kathy returns home and Jojo gets scared of being seen by her. She hides all her things in the cupboard and Mr. Jones hides her inside his blanket. When Kathy enters his room to check on him, he asks for a healthy soup to send her to the kitchen. Grandpa Jones then tells Jojo that she does not need to worry and he will get her dropped off at her house. On the other side, we see Max has arrived at the competition grounds and calls Kendall. They talk for a while, and it seems that their fight is resolved. Meanwhile, Martha goes to the golf club and apologizes to Ken for spoiling his book launch. Ken is angry, but he controls it, and asks her why she acted like Kathy when she is 100 times better than her in every way. He leaves after that, and Martha happily wonders if he was complimenting or scolding her. Next, we see that Mr. Smith is having a very hard time doing the labor work. He even feels like he is going to faint but keeps on working. Later, Mrs. Smith gets a call from a hospital that her husband had an accident at work and has incurred a forehead injury. Jojo has also arrived back home by then, and Ken and Jojo leave with Mrs. Smith for the hospital. Later, Mr. Dan and Madam Cole also arrive at the hospital. Dan pays for all the bills, and Madam Cole looks at him suspiciously again. Later, we see that Max has won the first round of his competition, and the news is relayed on the television. Kendall gets very happy to see that. When she's leaving the office after work, she finds that her team is still working, because they need to stick some labels. She gets an idea and asks them to leave. Then, she calls Nikola and asks her to come over to her office. Nikola has already left for her home but has to come back because of Kendall. Everyone at the guest house has gone to see Mr. Smith, so Nikola has to take her baby along to the office too. There, Kendall asks her to finish sticking all the labels by herself and leaves. On the other side, Martha gets to know that it was Duke who bailed Nikola, and Leo also tells her about Duke trying to contact him. Martha thinks that it's all happening because of Nikola, and plans to teach her a lesson. She calls and asks her to come to her gallery as she needs to talk about some urgent matter. Nikola has just finished Kendall's work, but she thinks that it must be a matter related to Leo and rushes to meet Martha. She even leaves her bag and phone behind in a rush. When she arrives at Martha's gallery and asks her what it is that she needs to talk about, Martha simply hands over a painting to her and says that she needs to deliver it to a place, and Nikola gets disappointed. She takes her baby and starts packing the painting. Meanwhile, Martha leaves the gallery and locks the door and turns on the security system. When Nikola tries to get outside the building, the alarm starts ringing. She is confused and even her baby starts crying. Later, we see that Martha gets a call and someone is telling her about the alarms. They ask her if any employees are inside, and she says no. She adds that there are valuable paintings in her gallery, and they should catch the thief if someone is trying to steal them. Next, we see police surrounding the building and asking Nikola to surrender. She's very surprised and afraid, but still tries to explain that Martha had asked her to deliver the painting, but they don't believe her. They threaten her with tear gas, and Nikola is worried about her baby, so she puts her hands up. She is about to get arrested, but Duke arrives there on time. Actually, when she was leaving the office in a rush, she met Duke on her way and told him that Martha has called her to the gallery. Later, Duke passes through Kendall's office and realizes that Nikola has left her phone and bag behind, which had baby milk and water. Duke decided to deliver her things to the gallery, but when he arrived, he saw her surrounded by the police. He shows them his identity card as the director of J-Star and tells them that he sent Nikola to get the painting. The police confirm this with Martha, and she has to apologize for the misunderstanding. Martha is very angry and wonders why Duke keeps helping Nikola every time. On the other side, Duke drops Nikola off at the guest house. On the way, she keeps telling him that she is not stealing anything, and Duke says that he believes her because no mother would steal things with her baby on her back. Nikola cries a lot on the way, and Duke feels bad for her. When he returns home, Martha is waiting for him. Duke asks her mother how she could get a woman falsely arrested, that too with her baby. He asks her the reason to hate Nikola so much. Finally, Martha accepts framing Nikola and asks for forgiveness, but Duke tells her to apologize in front of Nikola instead of him. He also asks her about Leo, and why did she lie about never meeting him before. Martha says it's a misunderstanding and she'll call Leo to her office tomorrow so that he can talk to him and clear his doubts. She even agrees to let Nikola meet him, but she is doing all this because she does not want to spoil her image in front of her son. On the other side, both Jojo and Ken ask Nikola not to tell anyone that they live in the Cherry Blossom guest house if someone comes asking for them, and she wonders why they are trying to hide their identity. Next, Jojo tells Ken about a rich old man asking to date her, and Ken advises her not to care about the age if he is rich. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Smith are thinking of leaving the city and going to some village as they can't survive here. But Madam Cole asks Mr. Smith to bake some bread for her and she will go sell it. She says that if people like his bread, he has to try to make a living here instead of running away. The next morning, we see Leo coming to Martha's office. Duke and Nikola also arrive there, and Martha apologizes to Nikola, saying that she was annoyed at explaining again and again that she was not involved in her husband's death. Next, Leo explains that Jeremy was like a younger brother to him. But after he left the company due to health issues, Jeremy became greedy and stole money. He says Jeremy might have done it due to his poor background. Leo even goes as far as saying that he ran off every time he saw Nikola because he could not make himself tell her the truth about her husband. Nikola knows that they both are lying and does not believe them. Martha says that she had no idea that Leo was in the city and had forgotten all about him. Later, Nikola follows Leo to his car and tries to talk to him in private, but Leo says her husband was a very bad person. Later, Duke goes to Kathy's office to check on Nikola. He thinks that she must be sad after listening to all that about her husband, but she is chilling and eating cup noodles. He asks if she has not said, and Nikola replies him, why would she be sad when she knows that Leo is lying? She says she will find the truth eventually, and thanks Duke for keeping his promise, and tells him that she will be glad to help him whenever he needs. Duke thinks that he would never need Nikola's help, but as soon as he enters the lobby, he meets his ex-girlfriend. She has come there with her fiancé to book the hotel for her wedding. She is trying to show him off in front of Duke, and even says that she left him because he was such a loser. Duke feels very bad when she says that he must be single, and lies that he is engaged. His ex-girlfriend asks him to go on a double date if that is the case because she thinks that he is lying. Duke wants to make excuses to escape from this situation because he has no girlfriend, but he spots Nikola and makes a plan. He agrees to meet for the double date in 2 hours. After that, he runs off to Nikola and asks for her help. He says that she needs to pretend to be his fiancée for a day because he wants to make his ex-girlfriend jealous. Nikola agrees to it, and Duke takes her for a makeover. He tells the professionals the kind of look he wants, and when Nikola comes out after the makeover, he is not able to recognize her. He also gives her a ring to wear on her ring finger. Nikola says that since they are pretending to be engaged, they should call each other by their names. She calls him Duke Darling, and Duke feels quite happy after hearing that. Later on the date, his ex-girlfriend keeps asking questions about their relationship. When she finds out Nikola is not from a rich family, she starts making fun of her. She says that President Joneses and his mother would never agree to their marriage, and that they can only pass their time together for a while. She even calls Nikola a plaything, which angers Duke a lot. Just at that moment, Nikola starts pretending to have morning sickness. When they ask if she is pregnant, she doesn't deny it and starts behaving as if she were shy. The ex-girlfriend is shocked to know that Duke got his girlfriend pregnant and gets very jealous. Later, Duke asks Nikola why she pretended to be pregnant because it was not their plan. Nikola says it was the best way to make his ex believe he had moved on and was planning a future with someone else. Duke smiles at her, and she starts pretending to have morning sickness again. Duke laughs and thinks that she is a total drama queen. Next, we see that Max has won the second prize in the competition. Kendall and Kathy are watching his interview on the television. Kendall is very happy to see Max winning, but Kathy seems unimpressed. She says that she will pay attention to him if he wins some big tournament. On the other side, Grandpa Jones and Jojo meet after the 5-day limit. Mr. Jones asks Jojo to let him eat his medicines before listening to her reply, as he is sure that she's going to reject him. But Jojo tells him that he won't need his medicine and agrees to be his girlfriend. Mr. Jones is very happy to hear that and gives her the diamond necklace and puts it on her. Later, when she returns after her date, Ken sees her getting down from an expensive car. He doesn't know yet that she's dating Mr. Jones, but he asks for a party as now she is about to get rich. Next, we see Duke and Nikola having dinner together as Duke is giving her a treat for helping him out. Nikola asks him why his ex left him, and he tells her that she was unhappy because of a failed partnership between their family companies. Nikola says she was very stupid to miss out on such a kind and handsome man, and she will definitely regret it in the future. Duke laughs at her words, and then he asks her about her husband. Nikola says that he was a very honest, kind, and supportive person. They had met at an orphanage and seen good and bad times together. Later, Duke drops her at the guest house. Max, returning from the competition, meets her at the entrance. Nikola explains to Max that Duke was not a bad person as they thought him to be initially and introduces them. She tells Duke that Max has just won a tournament and he is a very caring person and takes a lot of care of her baby. Duke does not seem very happy to hear Nikola praising another man in front of him, and it seems he is getting jealous. Later, he sees them laughing together and leaves in a bad mood. Next, we see Nikola receives an envelope from her husband's locker. It was an invitation to an art event in Singapore, and Nikola wonders if this has any connection with Martha's art gallery. At night, Mr. Smith starts making bread, and in the morning everyone eats the bread he has baked for breakfast and find that it is very tasty. Later, they set a temporary stall outside a station and all the guests of Cherry Blossom help in selling Mr. Smith's bread. Everyone likes it, and soon enough they're sold out. Mr. Smith gets very motivated after watching this, and now he plans to work and save money to open a bakery. Next, we see Nikola and Duke meet each other in the elevator. Nikola is back to her own fashion style, and Duke tells her that she should wear light colors and keep her hair open. He says that she was looking very pretty yesterday, but Nikola corners him and says that he should keep his advice to himself because everyone has their own personality. Nikola leaves the elevator in style, showing off her pigtails, and Duke smiles at her style thinking that she's cute. Later, Nikola shows Kathy the invitation letter for the art event and tells her about her suspicions, so Kathy decides to get it investigated. She decides to organize an art event and takes Martha's help. She plans to implant Nikola in Martha's team to get access to their resources. She calls Martha and talks about the project, and then she sends Nikola to her office to coordinate with the employees of the art gallery. Nikola works with them all day and later goes on a team dinner. There, the art gallery employees are trying to make fun of her background. Then they start talking about her husband and taunt her for being the wife of a scamster. Nikola keeps drinking alcohol and does not reply. Duke is also having dinner at the same venue with his team. He overhears this interaction and feels bad for Nikola. Later, he hears noises coming from that area and finds that Nikola has started beating the art girls. She is headbutting each of them one by one, and all the women run to save themselves. Duke reaches inside to find Nikola sleeping on the floor after making so much trouble. He wakes her up, and Nikola thinks of him as her late husband, so she hugs him and starts crying. She tells him that she misses him a lot, and Duke gets her inside his car and brings her to the guest house. There, Max is already standing in front of the guest house waiting for Nikola as he is worried about her. When Duke tries to take her inside, Max pushes him aside and carries Nikola on his back. He thanks Duke for bringing her home and leaves. Duke gets mad and jealous and wonders why was Max thanking him as if Nikola was his girlfriend. However, Max just cares for Nikola and her baby a lot because he thinks that it is his responsibility, as he believes that he caused Jeremy's death.